Okay, folks, thanks everybody for coming. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Just prior to the first agenda item, I would like to make a shout out to the Acadie Bathurst Titan for winning the Memorial Cup. And I particularly want to note Ethan Crossman, perhaps one of the best hockey players ever to come out of Sackville, was on that team. And those of you who watched him play may have seen him play some of the best hockey of his life in that Memorial final. And so I want to not only thank them, the players, the organization, but also congratulations to the mayor and council of the town of Bathurst on that accomplishments. All right, move to item number 2. You have an agenda. Is there any issues? Moved to accept the agenda by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Black. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Question period. Questions from the last month or so of activity.
Hi, my name's Erna Duchemin, and I just wanted to mention that on Friday I came and dropped off a petition that a group of us had gone around to different streets in Sackville. Basically, we wanted to ask people what they thought of the proposed seniors apartment building, and so I handed in the petition to Donna, and she said she would pass it around to everyone on council. We got 159 signatures, and basically most of the people just couldn't understand how the apartment building without retail on the main floor would bring any business downtown. And there were other concerns also. But my question is, I'd like to know if the councillors are going to even consider taking that petition take it into consideration when you're doing your vote tonight. I just want to know, was it worthwhile? I mean, we just wanted to know what people thought. We went to a cross-section of streets, and everyone basically who signed the petition did not want the rezoning to go through. So my question is, will you even take that into consideration when you vote?
Well, I can answer that. Yes, of course. We appreciate the effort you put into it, and all of councillors have seen it. And we have quite a bit of material that's come in on the topic, so it certainly is part of everybody's consideration. So thank you for that effort. Any other questions?
Is it possible to turn the volume up? Does anyone have a button?
I'll move the microphone closer. Does that help?
Good evening. My name is Meredith Fisher. My question, well, I have something to ask you. The issue of rezoning of the Lafford property is really about maintaining downtown green space, not apartments or downtown density. Would you please, as councillors who have been elected by the people of Sackville, keep in mind while you are voting the importance of maintaining existing green space and mature trees in the downtown core of Sackville? Would you please keep in mind while you vote that such spaces are important to the physical health of our community and to make our town more attractive to both our residents and our visitors? Thank you.
Okay. I'll remind you, please, that this is question period, so please ask a question. This isn't public presentation time. Thank you. Any other questions?
I do have a question. It used to be that councillors represented wards and would inform their constituents on important issues and get input from them. Now, since all the councillors now are councillors at large, don't you think the council should inform Sackville citizens and survey them, their opinion on the construction of a building that will affect the appearance of the downtown, and as well, other issues of importance to them.
Well, I guess it's a question we always get as to how much communication is required. And we get it multiple times when someone believes a particular issue is extraordinarily important to them. Whatever we do doesn't meet their requirements. So what we take as a standard operating procedure is we take what's legally required to consult and to obtain opinions, and then we go a bit above that. And we do it consistently so that we're not considered that we're favoring any particular project or looking like we're against it. So we try to follow a consistent communication pattern on that. The second item is that this council recognized that there needed to be better input on the guiding documents, and we created in our strategic plan a consistent basis of going out to the community to try to find what is working, what isn't working, and we're just about to launch that at halfway through our mandate. So we understand the issues, but we also try to follow a consistent process. Any other questions?
My name's Brian Lane. I just had a question about the rezoning of the property downtown. Is it also part of the heritage area, that lot?
Yes, it is in that zone, yes.
Okay. And so that's, what's going to be done first? Is it going to be the rezoning or the repeal of the heritage bylaw? I don't have the agenda with me.
Well,
What are you going to discuss first? Are you going to
Well, it's
discuss repealing the heritage bylaw, or are you going to talk about the rezoning?
we are ahead in the rezoning in the process.
Okay?
And on tonight, the process has the heritage after on the agenda of, that topic comes up afterward.
The rezoning of the property for the seniors complex is also part of the heritage area.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for the? Okay. Hearing no more, we move to disclosure of interests. Council has seen the agenda. Are there any disclosures of interest per se? Deputy Mayor Aiken?
Thank you, Your Worship. Since I own a building in the Heritage District, I'll recuse myself for the public hearing and the vote.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. So we move to item 5, minutes. We have the special meeting closed in camera May 15th. You've all had this for 4 or 5 days. Any comments, changes, et cetera? Question? Motion? Councillor Mitten moves to adopt, seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion is approved. Regular council meeting of May 15th, 2018. Minutes of. Councillor O'Neill moves. Councillor Black seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Special meeting, June 4th. Minutes of. Councillor Black moves. Councillor O'Neill seconds. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Minutes of the special meeting of closed in camera June 4th. Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Black. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We noted no business arising from the minutes that are not already on the agenda. Number 7 is election of deputy mayor. As you know, the procedure is on or about at anniversary time of the election of the deputy mayor. We are to renew it on an annual basis or appoint a deputy mayor on an annual basis. So I would call for a nomination for deputy mayor. Councillor O'Neill?
Yes, Your Worship, I Move that Councillor Ron Aiken be re-elected as deputy mayor, effective immediately.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill. Seconded by Councillor Mitten. Are there any other nominations? I must call 3 times. Is there any other nominations for deputy mayor? Hearing none, Mr. Aiken is nominated as deputy minister, but what I would like to do is call for a resolution adopting that. Oh, did, right, did move, did second, thank you. So, question. All those in favor? Opposed? I announce, once again, Ron Aiken is deputy mayor of the town of Sackville. Thank you. Item number 8 is, starts with my report on the Southeast Regional Services Commission. The meeting was also the annual general meeting, and so we received the financial statements as well as an annual report, which I will place in the councillor's office for your look at it. They also appointed committees, and once again, I'm on the Strategic Planning Committee for the board. A couple of items that came out noticeable in that report was that the creation of the waste generator at the waste plant has generated a savings of 15,720 tons of greenhouse gases that are no longer being emitted by burning that waste refuse there. We made appointments to, as you had heard before, they created a Regional Trails Council and a Regional Recreational Council, and those appointments were formally made. We moved back into a regular meeting, and we spoke about tourism, and coincidental to the regional event, the regional movement, City of Moncton had also undertaken a complementary contract to look at improving its tourism, and the two appear that they're going to fall together quite nicely in terms of how the regional tourism strategy may unfold. There were several purchases of capital equipment for the Eco360. Moncton has achieved and hopes to have a formal announcement of being the Curl Canada headquarters for 2020's tournament for the championships. Also this week, we did have a meeting of last week we had a meeting of the Strategic Committee, and asked to define, because tourism was the main thrust of that committee last year and is now into the implementation stage, the committee was asked to come back with some suggested priorities. We had a very good discussion. The other item that was hung over from last year was unsightly premises for LSDs, but that legislative change did not occur, so it still hangs there waiting for the province to look at a regulatory mechanism that allows the LSDs to delegate upward unsightly premises to the Regional Service Commission. So that's still on the books from last year as well. We discussed several potential topics, including the values of regional aspects of waste or water services, regional policing, and municipalization, i.e. LSDs getting a different level of local governance structure. While my input was that the last one was the most important, that the LSDs need to have an opportunity. They're now taxed without any representation. They don't have any local government. They have a bureaucrat who runs their decisions. And my suggestion was that we should look at illustrating the value of services of economies of scale, particularly for LSDs, not necessarily for the whole region, but particularly for LSDs. In terms of an opportunity suggested was that if you want to show how septic fields can be built more effectively and efficiently and maintained more efficiently in rural areas, we should be applying for infrastructure dollars as a pilot that also shows that to the LSDs over that type of a structure is is viable if you have another level of government or create some form of a municipal government structure. So we didn't make any decisions on which ones to pursue, but that was, we will take that rough thought about regionalizing municipalization to the board next meeting. So that's it from me. Deputy Mayor, you were at the board. Anything to add to the board meeting at all? No. Okay. Any questions on my report? No? Thank you. So that takes mine, and the second item of Southeast Regional Services is from Planning, Ms. Bickford.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll start by doing our monthly planning and development report, and then follow on with the other items that are on under my section. So in the month of May, 11 development permits, or development and building permits, were issued. Year to date, there's 23 permits that have been issued at a construction value of $11 million. This is up significantly from this time last year, which we've seen 13 permits at a value of $1.3 million. During the month of May, the Southeast Regional or Service Commission Planning Review and Adjustment Committee met twice to discuss development proposals that were related to Sackville. On May 9th, they reviewed the rezoning request by J.N. Lafford Realty and passed a motion to recommend the change in zoning to council. As well, on May 23rd, they held another meeting which was to hear the Bob Edgett Memorial Boxing Club rezoning proposal. And that particular motion as well, they are recommending to council the rezoning. Some other items that have been taken care of or are in the process of being taken care of in the month of May were steps were taken to finalize the rezoning for Robson Avenue, which was the ambulance service. And we're just in that stage of registering the bylaw in the registry office. The public hearing was held for the Main Street rezoning by J.N. Lefford Realty, and there's outstanding readings on that one as well for the bylaw. Another item that's included in the agenda tonight would be a request by Goya's Pizza for a sidewalk cafe, which would incorporate a temporary sidewalk proposal. So this would see similar to the Joey's proposal, where the sidewalk, the temporary sidewalk is in place to route pedestrian movement onto the sidewalk. And then the final item will be following, if there's any questions, will be the Bob Edgett public hearing, which was set for tonight. So if there's
Any questions on the report of Planning Commission? None. We will move to the next item, which, as Ms. Bickford indicated, was the public hearing portion. Over to you.
So the property is located at 203 York Street, and the proposal is to rezone from R1 to institutional. So the property highlighted in gray is the subject property that we're referring to. The Bob Edgett Memorial Boxing Club is a nonprofit group, so therefore it is eligible for the institutional zoning. The purpose of the rezoning request would be to allow the continuation of the boxing club from this particular location, as well as permit the construction of a new boxing club. Under the municipal plan, we have policies that suggest that institutional uses shall be permitted throughout the town. However, under the current zoning, the property is zoned R1, which is a low-density residential zone, and therefore the applicant is required to apply for an institutional zoning. This is an image of our zoning map. So the purple area would be the R1. The properties identified as red are institutional, so you'll see the DTI garages on Midway, and then the Mount Allison farm property is the larger red portion. And then the light green is our rural residential zone, so that's our unserviced lots in town. The boxing club has been operating from the property in excess of 50 years to date. This is an aerial image showing the existing building. And then immediately north of that, you'll see where the proposed location of the new clubhouse is. There is a church that's located across the street. Within the R1 zone, we do permit, as a permitted use, a church. So that's why you'll see that that one is still zoned R1 rather than having the institutional zoning. So this is the structure that the boxing club has been operating out of. It has operated to date under non-conforming use rights. This is typically called the grandfather clause to some individuals. However, under the Community Planning Act, as soon as the proposed use, the building is to be replaced, it does no longer apply to non-conforming use rights. So that's why the applicants are coming forward with the proposal to rezone. So the existing building is beyond repair and it has limited facilities as well. So at current time, there is no washroom facilities within the building. This is giving a view looking west onto York Street. So you can see on the left-hand side, I've identified, although it's behind the trees, the church location as well as the subject property is fairly large. It's a corner lot. And then you see the residential in the rear. And again, this is looking back towards the downtown area. So you see the DTI building in the background as well as residential. And that is the driveway for the Bob Edgett that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. This is the proposed elevation, so it's very similar in style to the existing building that's located on the building. And this is the proposed site plan to date. You'll see the parking is approximately located in the area where the existing building is set right now. There are 8 spaces that are provided. However, depending on the final review of the plan and categories that it falls under building code, that's what will be the final determinant as to the number of spaces that are required under the institutional zone. They are required as well because municipal sewer does not run to this extent, only municipal water does. So they are required to provide their own on-site septic system, which will have to go through another approval process from Department of Health regulations to ensure that it's installed by a licensed installer. So as I've mentioned earlier, the Southeast Planning Review and Adjustment Committee did review the proposal on May 23rd and have recommended through a motion the proposed rezoning to council. This is a requirement under the act that this procedure happen before any rezoning bylaw is adopted. This is the draft bylaw that's prepared, so it's very simple in that it states that the proposal is to rezone that subject property from R1 to institutional. At that point, any of the institutional regulations that fall under the zoning bylaw would apply to that particular property. So the Community Planning Act also requires, before enacting any bylaw, a public hearing to be held, which gives the public the opportunity to speak for or against the proposal. To date, there has been no written comments received on this particular proposal, and I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Bickford. So the floor is now open for anyone who wishes to make their feelings or thoughts known about this proposal. Please come to the microphone and identify yourself and provide your input. I'll call again if there is anybody who wishes to make their views known. And one last time. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the presentation of council? Have you had any questions? No? Okay, so that concludes the public hearing portion. Deputy Mayor Aitken, you wish to make move a motion?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I move that council give first reading in name only to bylaw number 244G, a bylaw to amend the bylaw number 244, Town of Sackville zoning bylaw.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Finney. Open for discussion. Anybody have any comments, questions? Councillor Finney?
I was just going to say, Your Worship, this is something that's really good. It's long overdue, and really looking forward to seeing Bob Edgett have a new place where they can actually bring in and train some of the younger kids and even some of us older people. But it's about time. Maybe some of us councillors can go up.
Did you just volunteer that you're going to join?
Not yet. Maybe.
Any other questions? So, question on the resolution?
Question.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We have a presentation on? No. Okay, so we move under planning. Goya's Pizza Sidewalk Cafe that we discussed at the discussion meeting, and your package has it on page 22, the materials. And Deputy Mayor Aiken.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council approve the proposed sidewalk cafe application by Goya's Pizza to operate a sidewalk cafe on a portion of the sidewalk in front of their business located at 96 Main Street, and is shown on the presented site plan subject to the following conditions. 1, that the sidewalk cafe operators comply with all requirements of the Town of Sackville Sidewalk Cafe operating procedures. 2, that the sidewalk cafe operate in conformance with bylaw number 246, the Town of Sackville noise bylaw. 3, that wooden fences used to delineate the sidewalk cafe shall be placed and anchored to the sidewalk where necessary in consultation and is approved by the town engineer to ensure the stability of the barrier. These anchors shall not protrude into the public pedestrian areas. Barriers and delineation that are not anchored to the sidewalk shall be built as part of the temporary sidewalk so it provides the structural stability to the barriers. The town engineer shall inspect and approve the anchoring system / construction along with any necessary modifications to the anchoring system. 4, 2 jersey barriers shall be provided at the cost of the applicant and placed according to the site plan. The jersey barrier shall contain permanent reflective markings to ensure night visibility. Reflective markings are subject to the approval of Engineering and Public Works.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Black. Floor is open. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Your Worship. As much as I hate to step on anybody's feet with the business here in town, I'll be voting against this, and it's based on all the comments that I've heard about the little bit of parking that we do have in our downtown. And so based on that, I guess I listened to the people that have been speaking to me outside, so I'll have to vote against this.
Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Finney.
Your Worship, I'm going to have to be voting against it too for the same reason. And I do think that actually coming around there at the lights is going to be a little dangerous with it being there. I like Goya's and I like Musa, but I just think it's not the right place and we're losing too many parking spaces now.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Mitten? Sorry, couldn't see it with the light there.
No problem. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to be speaking in favor of this motion. I think the economic benefits outweigh the loss of the 2 parking spaces. I do recognize that having parking spaces right downtown is important to a lot of people. There is a lot of free parking downtown, and as someone who is able to walk further distances, I try to park further away from right downtown, and I encourage others to do so as well, because I think that frees up the spaces downtown. So I think that for the summer months, and especially there's precedent of a sidewalk cafe being there, I think this is a good opportunity, and I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Councillor Mitten. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Could you put your nays, put your hands up, please, and note that Councillor Finney and Councillor O'Neill voted nay, but the motion is carried. Thank you. Takes us on still under planning. We have the J.N. Lafford Realty You guys have heard a lot of input on this. Is there anybody who wishes to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Aiken.
I move the council give second reading section by section to bylaw number 244F, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 244, the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw. Bylaw number 244F, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 244, the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw. The Council of the Town of Sackville, under authority vested in it by Section 53 and in accordance with Section 59 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017, Chapter 19, amends bylaw number 244, the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw, and enacts as follows. 1. Bylaw number 244, the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw, is amended by changing the zoning as shown on the zoning figure map 1 of the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw for a portion of the property identified as PID 00972182, as shown on Schedule A attached here to, and forming part hereof, from institutional I to mixed-use MU for the purpose of developing a multi-unit dwelling.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken. Seconded by Councillor Black. Floor is open for debate and discussion. Councillor Black?
I had sent an email to my fellow councillors to say that I might be a little wordy, and I'll just warn the audience as well. I just wanted to respond really quickly to Mr. Duchemin's comment about reaching out to constituents. I can't speak for my fellow councillors, but I work at Jean Coutu Pharmacy, and anytime that there's big issues that come up in town, I'm constantly asking people that come in the store, much to the owner's impatience. I try as much as possible to ask people what they think about big issues in Sackville and to get some feedback, whether positive or negative, as much as possible, just to speak for myself. But I wanted to begin by saying thank you to all the citizens who voiced their opinions at the public hearing, but also those who've sent us letters. Many times these council chambers are nearly empty, except for Percy and Sharon, who are pretty much here every time. It's nice to see civil engagement. I'm also thankful that council passed the motion to get this to a public hearing stage where we could actually hear what people had to say about the issue. And I also want to take this opportunity to respond to concerns in an effort to be more transparent and make sure that citizens feel that they've been heard. So I kind of put down 5 points that people had issues with this rezoning. The first one, I want to address the concern of rental rates. A lot of people had questioned about rental rates for this property. Some have complained, and with some justification, that this building will have rental rates that are too high for most seniors, that they are quote-unquote luxury units, a term that was mistakenly used, but used nonetheless. While it would be nice to think that any senior apartment building or assisted living complex could support all income levels, this proposal is not about that. It was never about that. The developer would not develop this building with the suggested rental rates if he didn't think he could fill it. And in fact, as far as I understand, most of the building is pre-sold already, which seems to suggest that there is a need at this income level. Secondly, there's been an outcry of the safety of this proposal location due to an increase of cars and therefore traffic, and also a concern for fire response. We received an email from Southeast Regional Service Commissioner Planning that I will read in response to this concern. As part of all rezoning processes, proposals are circulated to town departments, including engineering and the fire chief, for the professional comments. With this particular proposal, it was determined that there were 2 access points for this property, one on York Street and one on Main Street. Both are arterial roads, which are main roads in the town designed to carry higher traffic loads, and the location within the downtown core results in slower traffic speeds, especially in close proximity to traffic lights. It was also discussed that the developer will be required to place a fire hydrant by the water connection location on Main Street. This will ensure that the fire department has a water source from both sides of the development to access in the event that a fire should occur. As seen with the previous fire downtown, the fire department closes public streets around the location to ensure that fire emergency response is not impeded. The building is also being designed with a sprinkler system, and final plans will be need to be approved by the Provincial Fire Marshal's Office before the building can be constructed. I would like to add, on the traffic side, that even though there would be an additional potential 36 cars in this area, one could imagine that due to the desire to be a walking distance to downtown, that would not show a significant increase. Also, I find it unlikely that all 36 cars would be on the same schedule, zooming in and out of this location all at the same time. This is unquantifiable, of course, but merely an observation. The third is that there's been talk of densification of our downtown core. I will easily admit that having another apartment building in that location will increase its population density, but I don't think to a dreadful level. Our downtown area and surrounding green spaces can certainly sustain this population increase. It may be worth it to look at our housing strategy, as was mentioned by one constituent at the public hearing. But to address that concern, this is from a report we received again from planning. The municipal plan and zoning bylaw is reviewed every 5 years. It was last reviewed in 2015 and adopted in 2016. During this review, housing and density were reviewed as part of the review process, as it is a key component to a community. A number of sources were drawn on to determine our housing policies and still current and reflective of the community, including annual apartment housing studies, Statistics Canada data, demographic trends, local surveys, and trends in building permits and housing types, to name a few. 2 more. I promise these ones will be faster. The fourth point, some constituents are concerned about the environmental impact of the surrounding area if the structure is built. As part of the planning process, just like public safety, all building plans have to go through the proper environmental or building channels to make sure that the impact that a building has on the surrounding area is minimal to nil. Again, just like public safety, if the proposal can't work within certain environmental parameters, then steps are taken to rectify that situation until all is right. The developer in this case is well versed in building near environmentally impacted areas, such as the work that was done on Waterfowl Lane. Also, in the case of this proposal, the developer is going to have, to my understanding, an archaeologist on site to ensure the digging is done the right way, and if anything odd is found, that can be taken care of. Last point, and perhaps the most important and the one that we've heard comments on the most, is the issue of the hill of lovely birch trees at the site. It's no secret that no matter if this rezoning request is approved or not, a building will go up on this site. It will either be the proposed seniors apartment or a block apartment building on the available currently zoned mixed-use land that the developer owns. The reality is that the stands of trees on this site are going to come down one way or another, and council does not have the jurisdiction within our laws to stop anyone who owns a piece of property from doing so. I'm sorry that was really long, but I felt like after the public hearing, we didn't have much of a chance to respond to anybody who had any comments at all on this proposal. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Deputy Mayor, I believe you were next in line.
Thank you, Worship. I spent a fair bit of time going over this, and I have great respect for the work that the people put in, getting petitions and talking to us and involving themselves in this consideration. But this is going to sound harsher than I mean it. I have yet to hear a compelling argument against the rezoning. The trees, yes, that's a lovely little stand of trees, but it's also private property. And those trees can be cut down at any time for no reason whatsoever for firewood. And the developer has promised to replace as many as were taken down, and I take him at his word. The increased traffic and parking argument, echo what Councillor Blanc has said. There will be no net increase in parking. Parking it's taken care of in the underground parking. And to put it a slightly different way, I have great difficulty imagining some sort of 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock senior citizens rush hour. People going in at the same time. It's in its location it is because it's in walking distance of things. We heard that the buildings are ugly. Fortunately, we're not voting on aesthetics here. That's in the eye of the beholder and not really one of our considerations. The argument about hard surfaces and this sort of getting rid of the green water absorbing surfaces. This building will have a smaller imprint on the environment. It's 36 units. Smaller imprint, i.e. size of 12, because it's 3 stories, smaller than 36 suburban homes. So in that sense, it's not having the sort of physical imprint that you would expect from that number of people. And finally, this argument was asked, why isn't there retail on the ground floor? As I understand from Ms. Bickford, there doesn't have to be. It just has to be non-residential use. And in this case, the parking garage underneath it qualifies as such, if I'm correct. So, because argue the need for business, and I would argue that we need the people in the downtown. One of the surest ways to kill a downtown is to get the people out of it. And so, and business does not set up in the eager anticipation somebody will show up. It sets up in response to population pressure. So getting people down there will encourage business in the downtown. I don't think we need retail on the ground floor of this apartment. We have empty storefronts at downtown as it is. On the plus, and I was, preparations, I was reading, there's a book called 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. And two of the ways they suggest is, one, ignore seniors, and two, don't change your downtown. And so for that, I'm going to be voting in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think Mr. Finney was first on the button. Councillor Finney?
I'll be voting against this, as I said from the very beginning, because I think it's unsafe. I go down that way all the time. I've watched the traffic coming and going. I've seen me go in a number of times, and it's almost like you've got to have your head to be able to swivel 360 degrees. It's bad in the summertime, and it's even worse in the winter. As far as the Community Planning Act saying that we need to densify and everything, that's wonderful. But not every project that comes forward do we have to say complies with what we want to have in that their Planning Act. I want to thank all of the people, pro and con, for their views. It was the nicest thing to see. It's nice to see that people are taking an active stance and becoming involved in exactly what's going on. My decision is not a personal thing. John and I spoke earlier tonight, and we expressed, you know, that people have differences of opinions, the same as I have with my colleagues. But I just feel the biggest issue is going to be safety. And I'm very, very concerned about it. I've come close to hitting people there and other cars as well. So for that reason, I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Finney. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you. Before I was on council, I thought I understood that council was the ones who made the decision. We do, but we have rules and regulations that we follow in order to keep things fair. This is a request to rezone a portion of property that already belongs to the Laffords. It's in our power to grant that or deny that request. It is not a request for whether or not they can cut down the trees. It is not a request about whether they can build a building on their property. It is not a request for what type of apartment they can build. It is not a request for adding more parking or not, because that is not subject to the will of council. That follows the Planning Commission and other government sections, not us. All of those things are completely within a landowner's rights. They are not the subject to the will of council. After this process, whether it's successful or not, the Laffords will decide what they want to do with their land. Permits for building are the realm of the Planning Commission. Concerns about safety and fire and traffic and density are subject to their rules and regulations. That's not why we're here tonight. It's only about the zoning. If they want to build as it is zoned now, they still can. They can reconfigure their building. Likely there would be no underground parking to be built in, and institutionally zoned land can't have apartments built on it, but it can be used as a parking lot. The Birches, losing them will be a loss. I love them too, but as our laws sit now, we can't dictate to a private landowner whether or not they can cut down a tree or a grove of trees. That's not in our power. The law regarding that now says that we can't choose that. we are not in charge of that. The seniors housing aspect, it's the landowner's decision what type of clientele they want. I do think we need seniors housing. Now 16% of New Brunswick's population is over 65. The seniors rate in New Brunswick is rising higher than it is in the rest of Canada. 97% of people over the age of 65 do not live in nursing homes. In another 20 years, I will well be into seniorshood. All of the baby boomers will be into seniorshood. On a personal note, about 4 years ago, my oldest sister and her husband sold their home here in town. They had been homeowners in town for more than 40 years. They were looking to downsize. They were looking to find seniors housing, and there was nothing available for them in Sackville. They live in Amherst now. There is a need for seniors housing. Maybe people are wishing it wasn't there, but that's not what we get to pick. I'll be voting in favor because I feel that the land that they own should be zoned mixed use. So I'll be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor Butcher. Councillor Mitten.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to start by saying I appreciate all of the input that has come from citizens on both sides of this issue. At the public hearing, in emails and letters, petition, and in person. I've spent a lot of time on this, and it's not been an easy decision to make. At the risk of being repetitive, as some of my councillors have already addressed many of these topics, I'll briefly review some of the same points to explain the factors in my decision-making. As has been said, one of the challenges that has come with this issue that is before council is that we are not deciding should there be another apartment building or should we cut down those trees. And both of these things could happen at any moment as the property in question is private property. But rather, the question is, should we rezone part of this privately owned property from institutional to mixed use? It is unfortunate that the lines and zoning were not drawn correctly several years ago. If it is not rezoned, there could very well be a less desirable building built, by which I mean not geared towards seniors, which is something we need. And the trees could be cut down to make way for parking. As I said, this is private property sold several years ago. It's no longer owned by an institution. We do need more affordable housing in our community, but we cannot control the rents, and there are other ways to address this issue. It's something I care about and want to work on, so please be in touch if you haven't already, and we can look at what opportunities are out there. I do think our community can benefit from senior housing. The downtown corner in question has arterial roads that serve it for our community and should be able to handle an increase of traffic that may come from this, although having people live downtown should encourage walking when possible. There will be a sprinkler system, a new fire hydrant, and there will be fire codes and building codes and planning policies to ensure emergency vehicles will have access to the building. There was a review of the housing plan that keeps being referenced. In 2016 and annually, there are market studies. So the information we're using is not outdated, as has been suggested. And housing that is higher density in downtown does fit with our planning goals. From what I have seen, there will be efforts to put up an attractive building that is built to accommodate seniors, which is close to amenities downtown, and that there will be efforts to maintain trees and replace any that are lost. Again, the property owners can build another building and cut down the trees to create outdoor parking at this time. I believe that if rezoned, we will get a better structure that serves our aging population. However, this project has certainly brought to light some potential gaps in our policies that we need to address in order to better serve our municipality. I believe we need to look at a tree bylaw, green space bylaw, and look at our garbage sorting policies so that residential buildings with more than 4 units look at sorting their waste so they divert more garbage from the landfill. We are missing something because we don't have these bylaws, and we need to fix this for the benefit of the whole town. As I said, this was a difficult decision to make. My family went to the Sackville United Church in the old church when I was young. I have prom pictures by the Swan Pond. My decision to vote in support of rezoning request is not meant to diminish or dismiss these concerns that are raised. But moving forward, I do want to address the gaps that the rezoning request has helped identify. I plan to vote in favor of rezoning the section of property in question to be mixed use instead of institutional. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's no sense in me sitting here and going over everything that's already been said. I look forward to this new apartment building coming in, and I really know that the Laffords will make it as attractive as everybody's hoping that it will be. I'm sure it will, and just again, I wish them good luck, and I'll be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you all for your thoughtful replies. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? One nay from Councillor Finney. Thank you. Motion is passed. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I move the council give third and final reading to bylaw number 244F, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 244, Town of Sackville zoning bylaw.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Finney, a nay. Motion is carried. Thank you. We move to item number 9, public hearing on heritage. There is no presentation, correct? Or there is a presentation first?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So that's correct. Tonight is the public hearing, or as the legislation refers to it, the hearing of objections with respect to the repeal of bylaw number 249, which is our Heritage Conservation Area bylaw. So, Your Worship, if I can, I guess I'd just like to at least state right off the bat here that, you know, certainly I don't want to get into kind of mid-2015. I think we all know what happened with the United Church. It was a challenging time for heritage in this community. It was a challenging time for the Heritage Board members at the time. There were several resignations. It was a challenging time for our councillors who were part of the previous council. Certainly a challenging time for staff and indeed the entire community. So I'm certainly not going to get into that tonight. But as things started to settle, as we moved into late 2015, I guess that's the point where I want to start the presentation tonight. Is as things started to settle, council agreed towards the tail end of 2015 to review the heritage bylaw along with the procedures that go along with it, and that's what we embarked to do. So we assembled at the time a small working group. It consisted of past chairs of the Heritage Board, the current chair at the time, some representation from the Southeast Regional Service Commission and staff, along with of course, the advice and direction of our own legal counsel. So we had 2 public hearings in early 2016. The second one was after we heard comments from on the initial draft that was proposed, and then in April of 2016, council adopted a new bylaw, and then we ran into the municipal election in May of that year. So all within the first quarter of 2016, we had a lot take place with respect to kind of getting heritage back on track, and that included the appointment of several new board members up until April of 2016. So the new bylaw attempted to clarify several things, one of which was that not all work on heritage properties required a permit. So it made it explicitly clear that the heritage officer had the authority to both approve permits, but also make a determination that certain work didn't require a permit. And that was focused on mainly normal repairs and maintenance. So as an example, if you were repainting a building with a similar or compatible color to what was there before, that didn't require a permit. But it also went so far as to say that it could waive work that did not detract from the heritage value of the building on the work that was being proposed, and we're going to get into that shortly. So overall, the focus was on the appearance of the streetscape. So it was on appearance, as opposed to traditional heritage regulation that gets into, the type of material you can use, the type of windows that you can use, the proportion of windows, et cetera. So it was a different type of regulatory environment, and it still is. So over the past 5 months, since about December, when several of the Heritage Board members' appointments were set to expire at the end of their terms, it was then almost 2 years since the new bylaw had been put into effect. And the determination was made to review kind of where we are in terms of the overall heritage program within the community. So the review included potential bylaw changes. What are the options? So instead of taking a very shallow dive into the heritage regulatory environment, can we go a bit further? The administrative procedures in terms of how the board operates and conducts its business. Future appointments. So were we prepared at the time to make appointments? As well as the town's heritage grant program. Over the last several years, we've maintained a budget of $15,000, which we've allocated over the years to people who have property within the heritage conservation zones, and we're looking to take certain improvements. So within this last 5 months, we've only had one inquiry. It came in on Friday. There have been no heritage permits issued since April of 2016. Instead, there's been 11 authorization letters. And I guess the difference between a permit and an authorization letter is that the authorization letters, which has been kind of part of the board's, I guess, flexible interpretation of the bylaw, in that as long as the work you're proposing does not detract from the heritage value of the building, you're allowed to proceed. That then eliminates the need for an appeal, or the potential for an appeal. So there's been 11 of those 11 of the authorization letters issued, but no permits. So I think that's an important point to note. And also since 2016, we've only had 2 grants issued. One in both 2016 and one in 2017. Both were in $5,000 increments to 2 separate parties. While over the years, it's been perhaps more popular, and certainly pre-2016. So overall, over the last 5 months, I guess we've concluded that the existing program, as I said earlier, takes a very shallow effort to regulate heritage, unlike other areas like St. John, the city of Moncton, Fredericton, et cetera, who also have heritage bylaws, but take a much more regulatory position. And I just want to be clear that this was deliberate, that when it was contemplated to adopt a new bylaw, one of the things that was discussed at the time was that there were sensitivities in the community. There was a very low tolerance for heritage at that point in time as we entered into early 2016, and the decision was made that the idea was not to further regulate heritage, that it would try and maintain a certain level of status quo, but clarify certain roles and responsibilities, what the responsibility of the board was, what the responsibility of the heritage officer was, which we attempted to do. So certainly over the last 5 months, I know there's been some suggestions to some of our members of council that the point has been raised that the bylaw is achieving very little in terms of heritage conservation and preservation on an overall program basis. So throughout those 5 months, we've done several things. We've explored what other options may be available to regulate heritage. We have a Community Planning Act. The Community Planning Act provides some very elementary ways to regulate heritage, but it's mainly with respect to urban designs, the placement of buildings, the look and feel of those buildings. So it's really limited to urban design. And we have a Heritage Conservation Act that's intended to regulate heritage. So 2 separate pieces of legislation. So we've explored the possibility of doing that through the Community Planning Act, the new Community Planning Act, which was brought into effect the first of this year, along with some fairly detailed discussions with the Southeast Regional Service Commission, just to at least explore to see if there was a way that perhaps they could take the regulatory environment over and perhaps do things a different way, but achieve perhaps the same thing. So at the end, there's been no complete and manageable alternative within the existing legislation, being the Community Planning Act. And we've done this, of course, on the advice and consultation with our with our legal counsel. So instead, what's been suggested is that perhaps we spend more time focusing attention and resources to enhance the heritage stock of buildings. This was very clearly noted in our strategic planning process, which we approved last year. It was suggested several times that improving the look and feel of buildings through almost a type of maintenance fund may be something that we would consider. But there's other ways to do this. There's other ways to improve the heritage stock and the appearance of buildings. As I mentioned, we do have a grant program, but there's ways to do this through support for existing organizations, partnerships with existing organizations, and also public awareness campaigns within our community to help get the message out of why the maintenance of these buildings is very important for our community. So that brings me to why do we have to have a public hearing? And the answer is quite simple. The legislation indicates that if you're going to repeal a bylaw, or if you're going to remove something, you need to go through the same process you do when you put the bylaw in place. So you have to have a public hearing. You have to take out a notice in your local newspaper, circulate it twice prior to the public hearing, which we've done. You need to notify all the property owners, et cetera. So it's the same process. So I'll outline that very, very briefly. It's a statutory requirement. We don't have a choice. We have to do this. If council considers a repeal, a public hearing, this type of meeting is mandatory. So we put 2 notices in the Tribune Post on May 23rd and May 30th. Plus it was featured in our half-page ad on June the 6th. So we've gone over and above the public notification requirements. We've also notified all property owners within the heritage conservation areas. They all got a copy of the notice that was published in the newspaper. The existing bylaw has been posted on our website, so if somebody wanted to, if they got the notice or they saw the notice in the newspaper and they wanted to see what was in the bylaw, it was clearly posted on the website where someone could find it, and we provided the URL or direct link to it, so it was easy to find. And as of recently, we've had a suggestion that when we're dealing with public hearings, that perhaps we put the public hearing on the community calendar, which we've now started doing. So that's all been done. So just finishing up, Your Worship, the 2 heritage conservation areas, we do have 2 in Sackville. One runs from about Charles Street down to Lansdowne and then wraps around by the Swan Pond up towards Rectory Lane. That is certainly the biggest of the 2 heritage conservation areas. And then Conservation Area B is really that area, the west side of Salem Street, mainly between Pickard Place and Salem, which you can see on the map that's outlined in green on the screen. So the final slide, I guess, the purpose of tonight is really twofold. One is that it's meant to hear from comments from the public on the repeal process. So if anyone, I'll turn it over to you shortly, Your Worship, and you can invite members of the audience to come and voice their support or concern. And up until the night of the hearing, we also provide an opportunity for residents to submit letters of objection or support. And I can say that we've received 3 letters, which should be noted for the public record. And I won't read all of them, but I'll basically summarize who they're from and the contents of them for the benefit of the audience who's here tonight. So the first letter we received was dated June the 5th. We received it, sorry, on June 5th. And it was from David W. Jones, who's located at 64 Bridge Street. And he, in fact, owns several properties within the Heritage Conservation Area. And in summary, I guess what Mr. Jones was pointing out was that he, along with many others, voiced their concern when the bylaw was originally contemplated in 2010. That was when the first heritage bylaw was enacted. And he also points out that these properties that he owns and will continue to own are located within the zones. So he's owned property on Bridge Street for 38 years, anticipating to build a retirement home. And then several years ago, he submitted a Heritage Board application to build his new retirement home and was told that he had to turn the garage doors, that they weren't facing the street. And that had, of course, a cost for asphalt, new design plans for the house, which have cost him overall in terms of a property value, et cetera, for resale of what he figures to be about $50,000. So I will read his second last paragraph, which I think summarizes the majority of his points. He said, "It is all well and good to attempt to preserve things exactly as they've been for 150 years. Unfortunately, you can't pick and choose which items stay without discouraging any incentive for growth within your community. When the intent of the community is to stop anything happening or challenging, then rest assured nothing will happen. Too long, we have accepted the demands in those communities wishing to stop growth and development, keeping Sackville down. Sackville is a wonderful community and deserves a chance to grow," and then urges council to carry on with the repeal of the bylaw. The second letter was dated June 8th. It's from Dr. Marilyn Trenham Council, who also owns property within the Heritage Conservation Zone. And in summary, she's suggesting that instead of repealing bylaw 249, which is the existing heritage bylaw, that she's suggesting a further review and a full process of the review with appropriate citizen consultation, as well as a comparative study of heritage bylaw regulations in other municipalities. And she's specifically pointing out the city of St. John and the city of Fredericton, which do have heritage bylaws themselves. She's indicated that the Town of Sackville Municipal Heritage Conservation Area bylaw was instrumental in certain instances of disallowing construction renovation to properties that would have failed the historic and current standards within our town. She thinks it would be imperative to ensure a highly qualified and dedicated board to ensure the implementation, as well as trained staff to implement the day-to-day matters in a manner that's respectful to citizens. So overall, she's indicating that there's much to cherish and much to attain in the future, and it's important to have a proper balance when approaching these types of matters. So this, Your Worship, is a letter voicing, I guess, the objection to the repeal of the bylaw. And then lastly, we received a letter dated June the 8th from Barbara Jardine, who's the president of the Tenchmore Heritage Trust. And again, I'll summarize Jardine's letter, and basically indicating the trust wants to express its disappointment about the Town of Sackville proposal to repeal the bylaw concerning heritage and the Sackville Heritage Board. They'd like to encourage the town to keep the bylaw, even if there are some problems with it. A revision could be done to improve those parts of the present bylaw which are not working, and repealing it would be a step backward. She points out that many other cities and towns in the province do have heritage bylaws, which they consider to be an important tool to promote preservation of their architectural heritage. They also pointed out that they acknowledge the support that the town has given the Heritage Trust over the years, and then further pointed out that the mandates of the Trust and the Heritage Board are different, where the Heritage Board has concentrated mainly on preserving the heritage and architecture of designed areas of town, the Heritage Board has, while the Trust has a very specific mission and vision statements, which she attached for Council's benefit. So they close out by indicating that the Trust is ready to cooperate with the town on heritage matters, and the Trust fully acknowledges and appreciates the support it's received. And then finally, they also indicated that they certainly wanted to make sure there was some consultation if there was going to be a different direction sought for the partnership between the town and the Trust moving forward before any further public statements are made. And I guess public statements referring to the information that was included in the May council package, where we suggested that perhaps as we look to revise our heritage grant criteria and looking to bolster support and build on strengths with existing organizations in our community, the Tenchmore Heritage Trust may be one of those organizations that we in fact reach out to. So, Your Worship, I guess lastly, in terms of next steps, what council decides to do will ultimately depend on what we hear tonight and what the will is of council. Or if there is a will amongst council, you do have the option to proceed with first reading to repeal the bylaw, either tonight or at a future meeting, should you deem that more time is necessary. So, Your Worship, I pass that back to you, and I open it up to the...
Thank you, Mr. Burke. So that opens the floor to the public hearing portion. I trust that summary was useful. If anybody wishes to step up, identify themselves, and make their feelings known.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Hyam and members of council. My name is Bruce Robertson. I'm addressing you as someone responsible for two important buildings within the Heritage Zone. As a warden in the parish of Sackville, St. Paul's Anglican Church, the Pink Church across from the Swan Pond, is under my care. Additionally, I'm chair of the Regional Committee of Anglicans, including those in Dorchester, who own and operate the Anglican Rectory on the corner of Rectory Lane and Main Street. These two buildings have undertaken many projects that have been subject to heritage rules. As people who try to abide by the will of the community, we have had these projects modified, always for the more expensive, in order to concur with the bylaws. I believe I have to indicate to you, for the record, that this sort of legislation puts already precarious organizations like ours at even greater disadvantage financially, and has added considerably to the work of the volunteers who manage these structures. At the same time, obviously, it has done very little to keep things truly viable, as can be seen in the events around our sister institution, the United Church. On one occasion, the Heritage Bylaw increased the price of a project by easily $20,000. Replacing the garage at the rectory, we were forced to include a great hayloft above, unused and unusable space, presumably to make the building conform to the style when horses, not cars, moved clergy through the town. This is money that our organizations can ill afford to spend, and which could be used by a charity such as ours to do the things that more clearly relate to our mandate: on visiting prisoners, on ministering to the sick and dying, on volunteering in developing countries abroad. I infer from the reports that we are one of two or maybe the only organization that received these grants. And I strongly feel, as the applicant to that grant, that the model for grants which insisted that the money be spent on non-routine repair, i.e. not on maintenance, is exactly backwards. Roofing, painting are the very things that we need help with to keep heritage buildings up and running. It was the absence of this 20 years ago that slowly led to the decline of the United Church. For instance, many depictions of our town include a view across the waterfowl park with St. Paul's steeple in the distance. Over a year ago, St. Paul's spent $80,000 on the re-roofing of that steeple. Yet we could not apply for the full $10,000 value of the grant to pay for this once-in-a-generation effort because most of the work did not pertain. It has to be said that having a steeple over a church is not necessary to its function, and in many ways, the burden of heritage activities has fallen upon our institution. I hasten to add that the staff here has managed these rules, that manage these rules, have been helpful and kind, and I admire the council's willingness to recognize when a bylaw is not working and make amends, both the process in the past couple of years and here now. However, I can't help but suggest that any money remaining in the grant fund be dispersed to nonprofit organizations, ours and others, that expended time and money on conforming with this bylaw that will sadly have no lasting effect. Or more importantly, that future efforts to sustain the heritage quality of the town offer more of a carrot than a stick, so that in 50 years, when the steeple of St. Paul's needs to be re-roofed again, the town that takes such pride in it might be in a position to offer substantial support for such a project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce.
Good evening, Wanda Severns, citizen. I wasn't actually expecting to make a presentation tonight, but when I noted comments or heard comments about the bylaw process, repeal process, and how that developed, I felt compelled to say something to, I guess, clarify how bylaws work and how laws work and how statutes function. As a lawyer and as somebody who's had an unfortunate role in this town in the past with respect to some of the heritage issues, I think it's important and incumbent upon me to say that while I absolutely respect the decision-making process of this town, and I do not want to be one of you at all, and so when I say this, I feel compelled to say this as somebody who works within the justice system or the legal system, and I don't at all envy any of the staff here who've had to deal with happy people, bad people, taciturn people. I'm happy I'm not one of the developers who have to get all difficult feedback when they're trying to make a living or develop the way they want to do. And I'm prefacing that by saying this, so I hope this room understands I'm not coming from a point of anger, but I need to clarify some concerns I have when I heard the presentation with respect to the repeal of the bylaw. The problem with the bylaw, heritage bylaw that existed at the difficult time of the United Church was that it had very little teeth at the time. This town attempted to deal with it as appropriately as possible. The Heritage Board attempted to deal with it as appropriately as possible. And the problem with that bylaw was the difficulties and the holes and the processes, the problems with it were very clear because of the difficulty with the United Church. And it became very clear that it was not a very well-written bylaw. And the Heritage Board didn't have enough say, certainly not enough sense of power. And so when the bylaw was rewritten, I have to say, to correct something was submitted, the bylaw that was rewritten was much weaker than the one that pre-existed it. And so to say, therefore, that because it had no teeth and it was basically something that didn't do anything, quite honestly, that's kind of self-serving, because the bylaw that was rewritten is the reason that people stopped asking for help with heritage issues, because there was a sense that nothing would be done in this town with respect to heritage because the heritage bylaw was being weakened. And that is exactly what happened. And so to say that, therefore, because the bylaw is weaker, therefore, why don't we just get rid of it entirely? I have to say again, and I'm asking you as somebody who works within the legal system to rethink what was just said. I heard every single person on this council talk about the power and lack thereof that you have as decision makers as when you have to apply the law that exists. You have said very clearly, and rightly so, the Laffords own that property. And so can we do a better building or a worse building? But if that bylaw doesn't exist, I can tell you right now, your voice is zero. And so I have serious concern that this idea of repealing a bylaw is therefore going to answer the solution, when in fact what has happened is that you have people looking at the destruction of serious heritage in this town. Coming as a person from away, from BC, where we don't have that sense, that entrenched serious heritage value and culture that you guys should absolutely value and cherish here. As somebody who came here as a tourist and has lived here for close to 2 decades now, I can tell you that the slow whittling away of the heritage you have is the reason that the resources are whittling away in this jurisdiction, and the reason that people will not stay here, and the reason that people will not come here to visit here. I can tell you that when people go to the Vatican City, they don't go to talk to the people wandering around. They go to look at the amazing culture and buildings. Rome, Italy, England. You walk around the city, you have people cherishing the culture and the heritage. And why are they doing well? Because you have visitors going there and cherishing what has been cherished, which is the history and culture. I have a friend who comes from war-torn Kosovo. His culture was destroyed. And I can tell you right now, every single person that had to leave that city, that area of Kosovo that was war-torn and the culture was destroyed, I can tell you right now, if he could go back and have the buildings and the culture that pre-existed that war, he would pay anything, to have a sense of history. So I'm asking you to think about the fact that the bylaw is not just a bylaw. It is giving you a sense of, at least some sense of authority and position and power, not to take away from economic development, but to consider a way to move forward in a positive, proactive way that respects all sides of an issue, green as well as development, as well as people coming in here to respect what you guys have, which quite honestly the rest of the country does not have. And that's exactly what is potentially being destroyed. Thank you.
Any other comments?
That's Brian Lane again. I just moved to this town 2 years ago. In a former occupation I had in Ontario, I had exposure to Heritage Act, and I understand the business owners or people. It is an owner's responsibility to take care of it, and it costs a lot of money. I don't understand the process here. It seems hurried. I mean, I watched the video of the last council meeting where it was brought forward. It was just like I was watching an Apple presentation, you know. Oh, one more thing, let's get rid of the heritage bylaw. Like, I don't know the background, I learned a little bit more tonight, but it seems unseemly, the speed that this is going. You have no replacement for it, you're just saying, let's get rid of it. There's been no real valid points that I can see. It's hard, yes, heritage is hard. But who's going to protect the town for us? We can't do it. You have the power, as the previous presentation said. We have an opportunity now, but as from my earlier question, obviously the new development that you've rezoned for today is in the heritage zone. So I'm assuming you've probably got the heritage application, because under section 7.1 of your heritage bylaw, it has to conform to the existing streetscape under the heritage bylaw. So if you're going to go ahead with this, my point of view is you should defer this. You've got something, you've got nothing to replace it. It's hard, well, maybe you should try harder. I don't see the effort yet. I wasn't here for the United Church thing, but I just don't think you've tried hard enough. You haven't put any effort into it. You say, it's hard, let's get rid of it. So if you're going to do it, I would say, can you at least wait until this next development has gone through the process? You've got a chance, there's a major development for the downtown area. It should comply to the existing heritage bylaw. You get rid of that, they can do whatever they want. And after they get away with that, other people who are having problems, what's to stop a building from being demolished? You said if it meets the zoning, they can do it. Go ahead. We can get rid of the theater, we can get rid of all the restaurants, any of those buildings downtown, they're gone. There's no protection under heritage now, is there? And why would that be? Because you've given up on heritage in this town. That would be a shameful event in this town. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Judith McShane. I own a house in the Heritage area. I wasn't planning to speak, I just wanted to see what was going on. But I would like to know what happens to the private homeowner. My house is in the Heritage Zone, but there's a great deal about my house that has nothing to do with heritage. It's had all kinds of additions and changes and things that have nothing to do with what the house is supposed to be heritage for. So what happens to me? What happens to the private homeowner when you can't afford to make when you wanted to fix the house, you can't afford to do the work that the heritage is asking for? You know, it's a lot cheaper to do other things than what the heritage is when it's a private home. You want to keep these homes, especially the great big ones, but if people can't afford to keep them up, then how can you keep them? So what happens to the private homeowner? And are you replacing the heritage zone with something else? You know, like I don't quite understand either. Like, you're just going to repeal the bylaw, then what? Like, can I do anything I want to my house next week when you repeal the bylaw, or not? That's what I don't understand.
Thank you. I did not reiterate, although I've done it multiple times with public hearings, we don't answer questions and respond, but we take your point. Thank you very much.
Hi, again. I guess the best place for me to start is at the very beginning, which is where I was when the university was demolishing buildings left, right, and center. Very, not extremely interesting or good buildings, but strategically placed buildings in the community, and they did play a role in the heritage character of the streetscapes of Sackville. I had a friend that was going to a meeting at Hillcrest, if you remember Hillcrest, on the corner of Salem and York. And he was going to a meeting the next day, and he went to go to the meeting, and the building was gone. They hadn't even applied for a permit. So we knew something had to happen at that point in time. We worked incredibly hard. At that point in time, I was a volunteer. I was also working as the Renaissance Sector Group assistant for $10,000 a year for the town. And we had a very strong group interested in heritage in the community. And so we decided to tackle it. We tackled it, and we collected, as someone mentioned, you know, you do your research, you collect the heritage bylaws that other communities have successfully been able to adopt. And there are communities like Lunenburg, hello, a World Heritage Site. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of tourists every year. A very strong, very difficult, very controversial heritage bylaw. But look at the success that their community has enjoyed, right? Am I wrong? You tell me if I'm wrong about this. Because that's why we decided as a community to go ahead with this. We did so much work. It was what was actually arrived at as a heritage bylaw for the very beginning was only meant to be that, just a start, a stab, trying to get something going. It was meant to be worked on, and we knew it was going to be a work in progress. We knew that it was not going to be perfect. We knew it was going to be hard and challenging. Yes, I totally relate to the lady who, you know, has a building that's not heritage, but is in the heritage district. You know, these are really, really interesting things to try and figure out when it comes to creating something that's going to be, hopefully, a real benefit and asset to our community as a whole. I totally relate to how you're feeling right now. I also own a heritage building in the heritage designated area. That was my grandparents' house. It's a big old house, and it does require a commitment, a financial commitment to keep it looking the way, and I always have my grandparents sort of sitting on my shoulder, knowing that, gosh, if I don't polish that brass knocker on the front door, my grandmother's gonna be looking at that and saying, it's time, you gotta do that. But I have so many people who compliment me every time I put a roof on, I do any little thing. People notice it. It's something that people see. It's not, I understand the Anglican Church. Yes, a huge dilemma. You have very big expenses when you do things.
Meredith,
You've done very well.
Meredith, please speak to the mic, because
Okay.
you're going to be on audio afterward. Right?
Okay,
So we want people to
sorry.
hear what you're saying.
Sorry, John. Anyway, you can tell how emotional I am about this subject. And I do realize that the United Church was the biggest challenge. We saw, as we spoke about before, the divisive issue that divided our whole town. And there will be more of those. We need the heritage policy. We need it enhanced rather than repealed. Yes, it's a lot of work. Yes, it's expensive. Well, $15,000 in the grand scheme of things is not a big deal. Many of our local businesses have benefited from those grants to be able to do things like signage. I know what you mean about your, you know, wanting money for your steeple and your roof and your paint. Yes, in Rivière-du-Loup, that's the way they do it. they give every year a different area of their town. Money for people that have heritage homes can apply for the grants to help them with paint and roofs. That really helps, I'll tell you. And they have it's a very important to their city also. It's now a city. Anyway, I don't know. I think if we scrap this bylaw, it's going to be sending us backwards really, really fast. And I would highly recommend to council that we do not repeal the heritage bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship, excuse me, Your Worship, members of council. I had the distinction of serving this town for 26 years in this room, and I sat back and I came here tonight to listen to all the arguments and the pro and con for this heritage bylaw. I've heard things from emotional, expensive, we should do it. It brings people in our town. We're not the Vatican. We're the town of Sackville. And I'm going to make one point, and I'm only going to say it, and then I'm going to get away from the microphone. The heritage bylaw thing has been a problem and a pain in the butt in this town for a long time. As mayor of this town, I've been threatened. I had threats to burn my property down. I had threats to go to court. I had threats that I could probably serve in prison or jail over this heritage bylaw. Don't feed me a heritage bylaw about the emotion, because I think that when we first started this, a heritage bylaw is not a few group of houses in downtown, it's the town of Sackville. I live on 181 Main Street. My house was built after the Second World War, and it was built for people and veterans coming back. That's heritage to me. But I've tried different things, and I couldn't get any help for that. If you want to maintain that heritage property, you go ahead and you fill your boots, people, and you put all the money into it you want, and you can make it as good and nice as you can make it and bring it back to what it was. But the average person in this town cannot afford to do that. The average person in this town is having a hard time just keeping a house going, because there's nothing, you know? And people are having a real problem with this, and I hear about the heritage bylaw every day when I go in downtown and a coffee shop and that. And people, it's been a real pain in this town. And if you can't come up with a bylaw that is written that can take the whole town of Sackville as being a heritage area and not a certain group, and not jump over a certain group and go to up the street a little further, then you scrap it. You get rid of it. Because if it's not for the whole town of Sackville, as far as I'm concerned, in my time in the town, and I've lived here all my life, and I have had enough of heritage bylaw. If you guys would ever got threatened and received letters that you were going to have your house burnt, your family and my wife burnt, and threatened my life, then you would be emotional too. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Bear.
Finally, after almost 4 years, I get to speak about my issue with the Heritage Board. 2014,
Sorry, could you just tell us your name?
yeah, sorry, my name's Colleen Wheaton. I own 36 York Street, AKA Main Attraction. Walking by Main Attraction, if you're looking at it, does it look like a heritage home to you? Me, the add-on was put on in 1997. That was my shop. I've been in town for 37 years working, employed a lot of people, and have maintained a decent property. And in 2014, I had to move downtown due to circumstances and renovate my property. One issue was I had to put wooden windows into my house. Now, if you look at my house, the front of it is an add-on, the middle is the heritage, the back part is an add-on. So I had to deal with the middle of the house. 8 windows, wooden windows, at the cost, my first quote was $9,000. Now, single income, trying to make a living in town, and maintaining a property, $9,000 was, for 8 windows, was out of the question. I did manage to get it a little cheaper. I did not want to put wooden windows in because I was saying, okay, now I have to maintain these windows. I have to paint them. I cannot open my windows because they are wooden windows. Our humidity swells back and forth. I can't open them. Personally, I'm at the age where the strength is not quite there. So I have to get a son to open my windows. Now, whenever we get a summer day, when you want to open a window, I'm so happy for you fellows, but I can't. Not in my apartment upstairs. Now, I was granted a little bit of money, but it took almost 3 months, the readings, to see if I could get this in, these windows. One was I wanted to take a window out to put a bathtub in. It happens to be facing the road. But if you're looking at my house on face value of the road, you see the corner of the window. I had to leave the window in, but I could block it in on the inside and leave the outside. Now, this window is by power line, so I cannot physically get up there and paint that, so eventually, I don't know, will it fall down, rot? I don't know. Wooden windows aren't known to last. They'll outlast me likely. So I was very frustrated at the time that I couldn't do with my house and put vinyl windows that were going to look the same as what the wooden ones in that I could open. This is my issue. That once again, I am a personal heritage home. I did not buy it as a heritage home. I was told it was. Could only do with it what they let me do with it. So I'm glad that there is going to be some type of amendment to this. I don't know what it's going to be, what's going to come. I do believe in the heritage. There is some issues that should be addressed. Yes, unfortunately, my fight was with you were arguing with the United Church building, going up, coming up, going down, staying, whatever it was going to be. I was dealing with one little window, and I could not take that window out. So next time you walk by my shop, you look up and you look at my place and say, is that a heritage home? To me, no. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other presentations?
Hi, Sharon Hicks. I don't have a lot to add to what's been said because other people have pretty much gone through everything that I had on my list. I would like to point out, though, that if the Heritage Bylaw is repealed and the Heritage Board is dissolved, according to the New Brunswick Heritage Act, which was passed in 2010, shortly before the town's bylaw and board were brought into being, the town cannot have designated heritage areas. In order to have the designated heritage areas, you have to have a board and a bylaw to work with the board. So that would be my caution there, that if everything is just dumped for now, thinking you might replace it with something later, in the meantime, there is no heritage protection whatsoever for anything in town. I do share the concerns that some others have had about how quickly this seems to have come to the forefront. We've been told that it was studied for 5 or 6 months, but there was nothing made public until after the decision had been made to scrap it and go through this process. That's a concern that I have as well. And also, I share the concerns about scrapping it completely before there's something else ready to take its place. I guess that's about it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other presentations? Well, thank you very much. You've obviously illustrated the variety of opinion and sentiment about this bylaw, which is what we understood we would be facing. So thank you very much for being candid and letting us know what you think. Council, any questions, any points you'd like to raise? No? Yep. In terms of, we're not debating that, we're just, we're at the public hearing session, so just minor comment on where we stand at this point. Unless someone makes a motion, then we'll debate a motion.
I'm going to be voting in favor of repealing it. Simple as that. My reasons I can make known later.
Okay. Councillor Black?
I would move first reading. I move that council give first reading in name only to bylaw number 249A, a bylaw to repeal bylaw number 249, Town of Sackville Municipal Heritage Conservation Area bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Black, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. So it's open for discussion. Councillor Finney, you jumped the gun, but you can have the first one.
The reason I'll be voting against, in favor of this here is because of the fact that this heritage thing has been a real pain in the butt for the last number of years that I've been on this council. The things that happened over the last number of years in relation to the church, in relation to the board at the time, or the newer board, then I was trying to figure out exactly who do they work for? Is it a council board, or is it a separate board? I still, to this day, still don't really know what's what. To me, I thought when we put it together, it was a board of a committee of council. Well, the thing is, it started coming back that actually, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do what we want. We heard from some of them. And so, to me, it's just been a pain in the butt, as a matter of fact, all the way around. I want to see us repeal it, turn around, and start looking for a new one. And instead of this, you're trying to fix what we've got now. It's not working. Let's turn around and get rid of this one and start finding something that will work. Even like, for instance, it was mentioned, Mahone Bay, Lunenburg, Wolfville. Let's turn around and look into them. St. John and Fredericton, or St. John and, Fredericton. Turn around and see exactly what they've got. We've known about this for some time, but we've never looked at those areas and turned around and seen exactly what they've got in place and how it's working and why it's working. I think it's time for us to get rid of this and get rid of the pain, because the last board that we had, as a matter of fact, they didn't want to turn around and abide by some of the decisions that were made by this council, recommendations and everything coming from the lawyer. So this is where the real problem, and this is what really brought us to where we are today. I've had my fill. At the time when Mr. Berry was the mayor, as a matter of fact, we both wanted to scrap it, but there were certain individuals on the council that wanted to turn around and carry on with it. Sometimes I consider it to be personal agendas, or working for their friends, or certain institutions that don't want to pay respect to it. For instance, when I can remember the Hillcrest House and how that happened. I remember Charlie Scobie was not overly impressed with exactly what happened and how quick it went down. So I think it's time to get rid of this here and start looking at something that's going to work and put in place. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Finney, anybody? Councillor Mitten, are you?
Yeah. I was hoping someone else on council would speak first. I'm feeling very conflicted about this, and I don't love having to vote on a motion right after a public hearing, because I like to be able to think about this and so, I mean, the way it's set up, we have 3 votes. And so I don't know, it feels kind of frustrating that we're in this situation. I understand the people that are for it and against it, and I honestly, I'm having trouble knowing what to do, and I think I will vote in favor of keeping it going forward, but I'm not sure how to vote going forward at second and third reading.
Thank you, Councillor Mitten. Councillor Black.
I'll just say a few things, because really, we shouldn't be debating too much because we haven't had a chance to actually consider what people have been saying. I will say that I grew up in Sackville. I moved here in 1985 when I was 10 years old, and Sackville always seemed very beautiful to me, with the heritage buildings, and at that time we had nothing in place. I don't like, it bothers me sometimes to speak about things that may or may not happen when there's no tangible evidence that if we didn't have a heritage bylaw, that every single heritage building in Sackville would be bulldozed to the ground within seconds. We don't know if that will happen. It didn't happen when I was a kid growing up, and then after the bylaw was in place in 2010, we do have the heritage buildings we have now, and we had them then. So anyway, I do want to say that we do have 2 more readings for this, and I think just as Councillor Evans said, for the Lafford property, decisions can change. This will give us an opportunity to consider things, potentially hear from other people if council decides to take it upon themselves to do that. Anyway, I will be voting in favor of this. But anyway, there will be a couple more readings and time to figure things out.
Councillor Butcher, please.
I am like Councillor Mitten. I'm still conflicted, confused. I have been trying to understand what's been going on with Heritage since I became a councillor. I know that we have beautiful properties. I know that while we've had a heritage bylaw in place, we've lost beautiful properties. We watched the Memorial Library go down. We watched the United Church go down. We've seen our heritage going down while we've had this bylaw. I know that for the town, having the Heritage Board, it's no secret, it's cost us lots in legal fees. There has been problems with it. I still don't know what the fix is, but I know what we have right now does not function. It does not set out to protect things. It does not help homeowners or people who are wanting to protect heritage. It does not work. I want something to help us maintain the beautiful parts and the heritage parts of our town. I don't think we have it now. I still don't know if getting rid of this is the answer or trying to adjust this is the answer. But the way it is right now does not work. So I don't know where I'm going with second and third reading. I know what we have now is not working, and therefore I am voting in favor of the first reading.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Your Worship. I remember this coming before council back when Mr. Barry was on council, and I remember at that time saying, if we do this, you're opening a can of worms. I know that it has done, the bylaw has done good in places, but I look at some of the older homes that are, well, let's quote Bridge Street, and I wonder where the dollars would come if those people, to fix their homes up, have to go and follow a bylaw the way that we have now. I'll be voting for the first reading, and we'll have to see where we go in between. But I think that we need to do away with this one, but then if we feel that we do need something else, then we really pay attention as to the way that it's written. I've heard it said all the towns should be putting money into helping some of the businesses upgrade their stores or store faces in town. We can't take taxpayers' money and do such a thing. So anyway, I know everybody has different feelings, but I'll be voting in favor of the first reading. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried for first reading. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 10A, which is the mayor's report. First, a couple of media interactions over the last while. Times and Transcripts wanted some input on the Dykes announcement. CBC Radio, we did an interview on the announcement of the study over the Trentamar Dykes. While we were at FCM, Mayor Cogan of Amherst and myself did a joint interview with Municipal World, which we just found is online. We just found it just before council came on, so you can check that out as well. I won't talk much about FCM at this point. I think we'll all report more in detail at the discussion meeting, but there were several interesting topics, which also allowed me to meet with the Vice President of CN Rail while I was there. So we had a very good chat about what we are doing and what we should be doing together in the next little while. There was, some of you may have been approached by interest in green burials, and that is a more environmentally friendly way to go if you make those choices. So the question was really about understanding and what are the options locally for some non-traditional burial options. And some of you may be contacted with that. There's been a lot in the paper and on these options in the last little while, so you'll probably hear of it even if you don't hear from that survey. There was a local arborist who was doing a bit of an exchange with someone, an arborist from Sweden, and just contacted me about some of the potential things that person could do when they were here, how they could learn and how they could teach us about some of the practices they might have, and some questions about some of the government regulations over such a switch, such a lending, if you would say that. Several of us went to the Air Cadets, where two of the cadets graduated and celebrated the year there. Second time up, it was a very impressive affair, and congratulations to the two cadets, who are, one of whom may be going into the armed forces, and the other, do you recall? Travel with the potential to go into the armed forces at a later date. Several people spoke to me about seniors housing, low-income housing, veterans housing, and housing for disabled individuals. Topic came up multiple individual times over the last month. I think it's important, you know, if you were hearing the same things, that we should talk about that. And we do have a little bit from FCM that we'll share next week over a new national housing strategy. Has limits on it, though, unfortunately. I attended Parks Canada's meeting on heritage sites in the Chignecto Isthmus, which was held at Mount Allison University. And we had interesting suggestions on how they were preparing for the tourism season, how they were marketing it, and longer-term questions. One of the individuals there is the head of Acadian Communications for a Francophone gatherings, and there is apparently a major Francophone athletic games coming to Moncton in the next couple of years, I think 2 years, and they're trying to use that audience as the natural place to show where Acadians settled and what the heritage of Acadians is, and they were at this trying to find ways to improve the Parks Canada's presentation. I also made note of that several of their assets are in the floodplain and in danger of being flooded out, and that there is a book by a former Sackville resident called Tintamar, which is a novel about an Acadian family that settled starting from Napan through Beaubassin, through Beauséjour, through Tintamar to Chepody, and that author is now looking for a way to turn this into potentially a movie, and we may have found some people that will back that through this meeting. So it worked out quite interestingly well. I attended a Tantramar education meeting, and I used that differently than Sackville Schools 2020 because Sackville Schools 2020 is the community group that is still meeting, as a matter of fact, is meeting tomorrow. But the Tantramar education is the principals, which has expanded to include the Dorchester and Port Elgin principals, who have been looking at the pedagogical implications of a revised education system in this area. And they have had a very good meeting debriefing us on experiential learning, academy approaches as opposed to grade approaches, deep learning concepts for teachers, inclusion methods elsewhere. So they have really dug into the nuts and bolts of what the teaching and education system could change and how, while Sackville 2020 is still interested in when they decide what type of schools they need to do these new things, that the community elements should be in and around that. So it was a very good meeting. It, to me, was a watershed mark where the principals now have a good understanding of what they see as the potential future, and now they've been asked to refine that into more detail. Zone 2 meeting, Deputy Mayor and I both attended the Zone 2 meeting, and we had a couple of interesting things. One was that we all shared local successes and issues recently. We received an invitation to Irving Forest Laboratory in Sussex, where they're doing a variety of types of research, and it's an open invitation for groups to come and see how they are handling bioculture, and I would probably let Dr. Aiken speak about this a little more detail later. We had an update on UMNB, which included a discussion over cannabis revenue and the fight between local governments and the province, despite that the feds have said they expect municipal governments to get cannabis revenue. It's up to the provinces to decide, and at this point, our province has not committed to that sharing. So that is continuing to go on. Spoke about street lights, our resolution that was adopted by UMNB on the costs of billing for street lights after we'd put in high efficiency ones, and the presentation to the rate hearing, and it has still not been replied to. So they will ask again for that reply. They had a certain time period and they've already gone over that. So it's a bit of an awkward situation with how they're going to reply to that. We talked a little bit more about the hotel levy options for the tourism and how that might fit given the province's statement in the last little while. It still seems like it is available, but it has to be done in a different way than what we thought might be done through a provincial regulation. I do note that Port Elgin invited us all to their grand opening of the new fire hall on July 21st, so please put that down. Petitcodiac shared that unfortunately they just had it. They have a new mural downtown and they just opened it last week. They were hoping some of us could make that. We did also speak about something I think I may have mentioned to many of you, which was our resolution about railways and culverts not being cleaned, causing local flooding with local governments. Did not get to the FCM floor for a miscommunication between UMNB, FCM, and ourselves. However, there is still interest in proceeding with that. And I did discuss with a couple of the other mayors whether we should prepare another resolution to go to UMNB, which asks UMNB to do something specifically about that project. So I have drafted that resolution, and I'll circulate it to the couple of mayors we spoke of and see if they're prepared to do that. We only have a couple of weeks in which to advance that to make the meeting in fall. And that'll be the next zone meeting. We'll be at the UMNB session. Deputy Mayor, anything else you'd like to add to that?
Now that you put me on the spot.
The lab, the forest lab?
Oh, yeah, the forest lab, it's, as far as I could determine from what they were talking about, it's essentially a bioengineering lab, looking for ways to grow trees faster and with less, essentially less insect damage on them. And apparently this is a very big operation, and they had, apparently have a robot. They wouldn't let us, could see it, we couldn't take pictures of it.
Yes.
But, and they also invited us to hear presentations by some of their people on various aspects of forestry. And I know these are the same people that were at the UMNB last year, so I suspect it'll be the same routine.
Okay, thanks for that supplemental. Walk in the Park, I attended and made comments on that. That led to the Alzheimer's Society has a new local contact. I had a very good conversation with her and sent her an email just recently about things that we might like to do with the society. So she was quite open and quite complimentary for what was going on in this town. Lots of inquiries about the Burnbury plant, as many of you may have noticed, a lot of activity down there. And obviously things are moving along, but we don't have a formal announcement to make. But it's obviously positive with what's going on with the work down there. Local cannabis story is that I did get a request to ensure that there was appropriate fencing around the new building that's being built, and I replied that I spoke to the MLA and asked that that be clearly part of the construction, and he has taken that on. Attended the Drew Nursing Home Week, as did Councillor Mitten and the MLA, the celebration of Nursing Home Week at the Drew, and that was a nice event, and they were very supportive once again of the staff, of what the town has tried to do for inclusion, for keeping people in the town, for age-friendly, becoming more dementia-friendly or dementia-aware. So some good compliments for all of you on that. And the minister has circulated a clarification of the press story that you couldn't have colored sidewalks, and that has been clarified that that was not what the intent of the announcement was, and there was an error, so that colored sidewalks can be done, although I think there may be some direction to how that might happen. And finally as well, I'm not sure how many of you may have got a letter regarding our food bank, and the letter suggested there were things at the food bank that weren't that well run, and that the solution was to hire the author of that letter to take this over. I was in contact with the Food Bank Association of the province about who that person was, and let's just say I let the food bank staff know that we were fully behind them, that those types of accusations did not merit even a recognition by us or a reply. So I trust you're okay with me doing that. And finally, just before I go ahead, I would like to note that our CAO went to the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators Conference, CAMA, in the last little while, and he received a long service recognition award for 30 years in the game. I think there should be more than just a recognition for that. So I'd like to acknowledge Phil's commitments, 30 years of municipal service and capacity, and thank him for his ongoing support of us here as we try to serve this community. And thanks, CAMA, for recognizing your work.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Any comments or questions on the mayor's report? Any supplementals anybody wish to add? Okay. That takes us from mayor's report to the CAO's report.
Thank you, Worship. First, thank you for the comments, for making comment about the recognition from CAMA. So obviously I had began child labor, but I've survived over the years. Anyway, it's a very interesting business, and not always the easiest of days sometimes, dealing with things as I I think all of council recognized and felt here this evening as well, and some of the issues that you deal with here and what you deal with in the community as well. And there's some real good days, and there's some other days that are a little more challenging. So anyway, tonight's my report. The reports exist within the package. I'll leave the details to the reports as they're presented. I'm sure any questions can be addressed at that time. Also just want to congratulate the staff for their efforts on the George Stanley sculpture that's been placed on Main Street. I think it's an excellent job and already has attracted many visitors and lots of conversation going on down there. So we should drop by and have a seat someday. Development's always not always easy. Sometimes they're good, but they're not always easy. But it's still a very positive thing, and it's nice to read in the planning report tonight in terms of where we sit so far this year and where relative to last year. And I think part of that is a reflection on the job that we've done in terms of the infrastructure and the programs and the services and putting our town out there. So I congratulate staff and the work that they've done and the support of council to allow us to continue trying to make Sackville a great place to live and a great quality of life here. And as I say, sometimes development has a price and it's not always easy, but it's never good if there's something not coming in the door or knocking on the door. So, and I guess I was going to finish my comments with thank you for allowing me to attend the CAMA conference. And while I did pick up the service pin, it was I found it to be an excellent conference that Fredericton hosted. There was close to 300 CAOs and senior managers from across the country. And Moncton also, Moncton, Dieppe, and Riverview also hosted a smaller session in the days after, which proved to be very good as well. So I thank you for providing me that opportunity to attend that. So if there's any questions, I'd certainly be prepared to address them.
Any questions on CAO report? Hearing none, thank you. We move to Finance and Admin. Deputy Mayor Aiken, are you doing this?
Thank you, Worship. I move the council accept the bills and payrolls for the month of May 2018 as follows. General Government, $755,732.51. General Capital, $111,102.22. Utility Government, $315,470.74. Utility Capital, $26,004.95. And salaries, $342,537.31.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Finney. Question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Have a report?
The report for Finance and Administration appears on page 30 of the package. The financial statements are included until the end of May 2018. We're continue to be on target for the current fiscal year, and the only anomaly being utility capital with the unexpected repairs to the excavator. The auditors completed their work in April and presented the 2017 audit to council at the special council meeting last week, and final approval was received at the May 15th meeting. We received confirmation from the province our 2018 gas tax fund allocation has been set at $409,866, and the funds for 2018 have been allocated towards paving, ongoing paving of streets. We continue to work on collection of the water and sewer shutoff letters that were sent in September of 2017, and we're also looking at extending accounts later this summer. We'll perform another round of collections at that time. The 2018 dog tags are available in Town Hall. Dog tags were due on March 31st and are now subject to a $20 late fee. As of June 1st, we sold 338 tags and continue to review tags sold in 2018 versus prior years to ensure all dogs are registered. The public will now see a new but familiar face at Town Hall reception. We want to welcome Jacqueline Archibald to Town Hall. You also know Jacqueline from the Civic Center, and she's temporarily filling in at Town Hall on a maternity leave. And finally, the bylaw students were hired as of June 4th. They introduced to council that meeting last week, and we welcome Nathan Denton, Matthew Puddicombe, and Robin Ripley to our bylaw department. As well, there'll be a motion coming forward shortly, working on dangerous unsightly premises, and tonight we're authorizing potential work to be carried out in the event of the homeowner does not complete the work in a timely manner. And that's the report, Your Worship.
Any questions for Deputy Mayor? No, you have a motion, Deputy Mayor again?
Yes, Your Worship. I move the council approve the hiring of Beal and Inch Construction in the amount of $8,590 plus HST relating to the demolition of property identified as PID number 00965152 under the dangerous and unsightly premises bylaw.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Finney. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. For finance, we move to tourism and business development. Deputy Mayor, are you taking that one again?
Me too. Okay, the report from Tourism Business Development. As part of the 30th anniversary of the Sackville Waterfowl Park, the advisory committee asked for trail names for the trails in the park, and a number of students submitted names they'd like to see on these trails, and we've now selected 12. And these were, the winning students are Justin Smith, Alyssa Wells, Skylar Nye, Catherine Premer, Mara Williams, Leah Gallant, Casey Murray, and Avriel Arancibia. And these students were presented with a token of consideration at the Alzheimer's Walk. On June 26th, we're offering a familiarization tour for the frontline workers and local businesses who'd have to deal with tourists to essentially make them aware of what's available in town so they can talk with the tourists about these things. We held a successful food safety course on May 7th with 22 people attending. The workshop is important boost for local businesses. And the Culinary Tourism Committee of the Cultural Coast met in May, and they have plans for annual general meeting in June and the fall. The Fundy Bay Partnership held their AGM at the Civic Center on May 9th and are working to bring resources to promote tourism on both sides of the bay. And finally, we've selected Andrea Wilson as the Waterfowl Park Artist in Residence for 2018. She'll begin working on our project in June. And we also created a new position of Student Waterfowl Park Artist in Residence in honor of the Waterfowl Park 30th anniversary. Logan Michelle Milne has been selected for this position. And that's the report, Your Worship. And there are no motions.
No motions? Any questions on the reports? The Border Town follows that. Is that part of yours, or is that?
It's in the package.
Okay. Okay. So move to public properties. Oh, sorry, Councillor Finner. Please go ahead.
Under the engineering public works, staff have been preparing streets for paving under the gas tax funding and the paving of various streets contract. Patching program for 2018 started during the month of May. Street sweeper continues to be used as part-time, as time permits, and will continue all summer. Staff completed several culvert extensions throughout the month. Staff assisted in the installation of the George Stanley sculpture that was talked about earlier. Staff continued with spring cleanup due to winter damages and will continue until done. Staff installed new service for a new building on Wright Street. The engineering department has been working with WSP to finalize the design and drawings for the Main Street reconstruction project. The engineering department continues to work with Crandall on the Phase 2 of the Lawrence Street project. Phase 2 tender is out to tender now. Public information session will be scheduled in the near future. The engineering department has been working on the tender package for a new bowl shed. And the engineering department has been working with the developer of the new ambulance facility to help facilitate the necessary services required for this building, as well as future development in this area. Now, the Tantamar Veterans Memorial Civic Center, Sackville Minor Lacrosse continued to run until the end of June. Maritime Conference was held on May 24th to 26th. There were 750 delegates that took part. Compressor number 1 was overhauled and was completed in May by Simcoe. Staff reviewed the working agreement for the canteen bar services at the Civic Center, which has been operated by Marianne Oster since mid-March of this year on a trial basis. After discussions with council regarding the current operation of the canteen bar, recommendation has provided to council for the consideration. There's a motion to follow. Municipal parks. The new banners installed in Bill Johnstone Memorial Park. The splash pad and fountain at BJMP are operating for the summer. The Girl Guides, along with Riverview Lawn and Garden, will be installing 5 new trees on Lawrence Street on June 16th at 11 a.m. The potable water is being installed in Beach Hill Park. Notice will be posted once approved for consumption. All town and district fields have been opened for the season. At the hanging baskets and flower beds should be installed by mid-June. And there is going to be a bulk salt purchase agreement, and a motion will be coming. And I have motions, Your Worship.
Okay, just any questions on the report first? Anyone? Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there, maybe I'll direct it to Mr. Acton, but I'm wondering if there's an update on the half pipe in the skate park, where that's at?
I think you'd have to talk to.
Mr. Cole?
Thank you, Your Worship. The half pipe is actually at the Civic Center, not put together yet. We're just waiting on the curb work and the asphalt to be finished in the skate park, and then it'll be installed. A couple weeks probably, I believe, before the work gets finished there.
Okay, thank you. Motions?
I move the council approve the bulk salt supply agreement with Windsor Salt Limited for the 2018-2019 winter season in the amount of $71.94 per metric ton delivered for approximately 800 to 1,200 tons of road salt, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the agreement.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken. Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Okay. I move that council approve entering into a working agreement with Marianne Oster for canteen bar services for a term from June 15th, 2018 to September 30th, 2019, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the agreement.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Carried.
And the last one. I move the council authorize the Public Works Utility Department to proceed with the extension of water and sewer services from Bridge Street to Robinson Avenue and approve expenditures for project materials from the following companies as per the submitted quotes of June 6, 2018 for overall costs of approximately Wolseley Waterworks, $22,788.85 plus HST. Stresscon Limited, $5,045 plus HST. Acadia Crushed Stone Limited, $3,667.50 plus HST.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken. We ask for a little bit of background from Mr. Acton.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've been working with the developer who's going to be building the ambulance facility, and as everyone was well aware, the services for this ambulance facility had to come off of Bridge Street because there is no current services along Cattail Ridge. In working with the developer, they were willing to pay for all the material to do such thing, and the town in return would do the install of the material, and we were able to upsize the water and sewer to provide us with an 8-inch water, a 6-inch water and an 8-inch sewer that would allow us for any to handle any future development in the area. Also gives us fire protection on Robson, which we don't currently have, And also, those same service lines potentially could give us services out to Robson that are currently not available, so.
Excellent, thank you. Very consistent with the vision and the number of investments that we had planned that would have to take place over a longer period of time. We're happy to see it's happening in year one. Any questions or comments? Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Finney. Move to item F, recreation programs and events. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you. The report can be found on page 48 and 49. A full schedule of the summer programs and events are now available at sackville.com. The Sackville Sports Wall of Fame induction ceremony will take place on June 14th at Tantramar Veterans Memorial Civic Center at 7 p.m. And we encourage the public to come out and show their support for this year's inductees. Our third annual volunteer recognition night will be held in late June. The following individuals will be recognized. Audrey Hicks will receive a long-term service award. Gloria and Nelson Estabrooks will get a long-term service award. Cy Bernard will receive a long-term service award. Kathy Purdy will receive a Golden Long-Term Service Award, and Kimberly Cadman will receive the Titan Community Achievement Award this year. The fourth annual Beach Hill Park Challenge obstacle course race will be held on the 21st of July. There will be a newly designed 4-kilometer plus course and a new kids race course as well, and people can register in advance at sackville.com. The staff is pleased to host the Wild Wonder Forest School at Beach Hill Park 3 days per week over the summer months. The Recreation Master Planning process continues to advance, and the Advisory Committee will be meeting on June 18th to discuss the next steps. The Southeast Regional Service Commission has established membership for the Recreation and Trails Advisory Committees. And pending a revised street closure approval from council that will be coming up tonight, staff will work with local organizers to host an antique car cruise on Main Street on the evening of July 27th. And looking forward to the Fall Fair in September. The Midway will be back this year, and there will also be live music from the Ray Oliver Band, Port Cities, Eddie Chase and the Graffiti Four, Cool Waters, and the Dashiell Edson Band, and much more. And that is the report. I have a couple of motions.
Any questions on the report? Hearing none. Oh, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Not on the report directly, but I'll beg your indulgence for a moment. This is, as we get into the summer, for all the people participating in activities in the parks and around, this is tick season. Sackville, may be an accident of sampling, but Sackville seems to be a fairly intense hotspot for ticks. The work we've done at Mount A indicates that somewhere between 10 and 15%, depending on the year, of the ticks around here are carrying the bacteria for Lyme disease. So if you're out in the wilds, and think of it, if mice would live there, ticks probably live there. And just when you come in, check yourself, get your dearly beloved to check you over for ticks. Ticks are kind of better than biting flies because they roam around you for a while looking for a place to feed. So you've probably got about 12 hours to find one that's not feeding. If you find one feeding, grab it right at the skin level with a pair of tweezers and pull gently. Do not try and light it on fire, hit it with alcohol. This will cause it to regurgitate all its bacteria into your bloodstream. So just pull gently and it'll be gone. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Finney?
Dwayne or Todd? I had a question for Dwayne or Todd, if I could ask now. I was asked by one of the residents and was told that actually the bathrooms are not open in the Bill Johnston Memorial Park during the daytime and sometimes on the weekend. Now, is that true? And
Mr. Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Finney. No, the bathrooms are open all evening and all day. As of right now, they've been open for over a month now.
what times are they open?
They're open all the time. They're not closed. We don't lock them. Currently, we don't. We may be looking at that for future, but right now we don't lock them. They're open all the time.
Actually, the reason they're locked is because of the fact of them plugging them up before like they did.
We actually closed them in the fall because of that reason, but once the summer hit, we opened them back up for the season again, hoping that that activity would stop.
Thank you, I'll mention that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butcher.
I move that council grant the temporary closure of Main Street from the corner of York Street and Bridge Street to Wellington Street with barriers, also at the entrance of Ford Lane from Main Street and the entrance of Allison Avenue at Main Street from 5:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. on Friday, July 27th, 2018, to accommodate a Cruise to Sackville antique car event.
Moved by Councillor Butcher.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Similar to one we've seen before. You want to just comment on that?
Certainly. This is very similar to one we saw before. There was some issues with the timing, so it's been switched to a different date. Otherwise, it is the same event, just at a new date now.
Okay. That clarity, question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Butcher. You have another?
I move that council approve the quotation from SSI Audio, Moncton NB, in the amount of $6,590.89, HST included, to operate the sound system for the Fall Fair events from Friday, September 21st, 2018, up to and including Sunday, September 23rd, 2018.
Moved by Councillor Butcher. Seconded by Councillor Black. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Move to public safety. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Your Worship. The chief's report is on page 50 in your package, and I'll just kind of highlight a few of the things. Sackville Fire and Rescue responded to 17 calls for service in the month of May, which included 8 commercial fire alarms, 3 grass fires, 1 residential electric fire, 1 utility pole fire, a smell of smoke in a residence, 1 motor vehicle collision, 1 call for assistance from Ambulance New Brunswick, and 1 mutual aid call from Dorchester Fire Department to assist with the water rescue. The total number of calls for service to date in 2018 are down compared to the same time frame in 2017. The fire group continue with training sessions during May, which took in ladder replacement, breaching of walls, ventilation, auto extraction, station equipment checks, and also 3 town and 2 company officers received their certification in basic emergency management from the province of New Brunswick. So they don't just spend their time going out to calls. They're very active with a lot of things that they, during their time at the station here. They're excited about having 3 new prospective members, Jeffrey Murray, Jill Hunt, and Jonathan Crowley. They came on board last week and will have an opportunity to take part in all training sessions, attend business meetings, as well as other events going on around the station. So we wish them luck in learning all the things that they're going to need to be able to attend the fires and so on. Firefighters held their annual muscular dystrophy boot drive, which took place on Saturday, May the 12th, from 9 till 12. Once again, this was a very successful event for the firefighters as they raised $4,200 during this event. Chief, was that 2 or 3 hours? 3 hours. 3 hours, so that's pretty good money for 3 hours' work. They have their 13th annual truck draw tickets out and around in the business community, and they encourage us to pick the tickets up and help the firefighters out, as there are coupons that are attached to the year's tickets, so it's kind of a win-win situation. If there's any questions, I'd ask you to pass them on to the chief.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. No question, we'll move to policing. Councillor Black.
Thank you. The police report begins on page 51 of the package. Total calls for service were similar to last year's at 101 calls to 111 last year. 78 calls were related to property crime, 16 were reported in Sackville. Related to the property crime, the Hampton RCMP apprehended a prolific offender who had committed break-and-enters in their area. During their investigation, they recovered stolen property related to 2 break-ins in Sackville that occurred in March. Uniformed members conducted 11 school patrols and 11 foot patrols, arrested 1 impaired driver, and wrote 18 tickets in town. On June 16th, the CPO and Sergeant Gagne are preparing a community consultation exercise by attending the farmers market on that morning. An interview with the local newspaper to let folks know and prepare their thoughts will be coming as well. There'll be some information on what local priorities are going to be, as well as seeking feedback on any ongoing concerns within the community. The CPO report starts on page 52. I'll just highlight, because as always, he's super, super busy and involved. Of note, there were 3 positive tickets issued in May. He does continuous work with MAD Canada, and he, as always, he's still looking for Sackville volunteers. And as far as his training and administrative, he has currently one active adult file and 6 active youth files within his diversion process. And that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Any questions on policing? No? Hearing none, you have no motions, right? So we move to policy bylaw. Councillor Black again.
The Policy Bylaw Liaison Group met on Thursday, May 24th, 2018. Bylaw number 262, a bylaw relating to street traffic, was discussed with a number of housekeeping items reviewed. Discussion was held with respect to lowering speed limits, hours of parking, etc. As council has now had the opportunity to review all the housekeeping changes to bylaw number 262, a bylaw to regulate street traffic, at the June 4th, 2018 special council meeting, a motion for first reading will be coming forward. Bylaw number 67, a bylaw dividing the town of Sackville into wards, was passed in February of 1983. A subsequent bylaw, being bylaw number 176, a bylaw relating to the election of mayor and councillors, supersedes bylaw number 67, and therefore a motion will be coming forward to repeal bylaw number 67. Staff received the local governance draft code of conduct regulations on Thursday, May 17th, 2018, and the draft regulations were provided to council at the June 4th, 2018 special meeting of council. And if there's any questions, I'll answer them, but there's also a couple of motions.
Hearing no questions, go ahead with the motion.
I move that council give first reading in name only to bylaw number 262, a bylaw to regulate street traffic.
Moved by Councillor Black, seconded by Councillor Mitten. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. You have another?
I move that council repeal bylaw number 67, a bylaw dividing the town of Sackville into wards.
Moved by Councillor Black, seconded by Councillor Finney. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Personnel, Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Your Worship. The liaison council met on June the 7th. As of the last pay period in May, there were 37 permanent employees, 2 temporary employees, which were crossing guards and recreation. 2 outstanding grievances relating to staffing are scheduled for arbitration next week, and the departments are well underway with summer plans. For the most part, have finalized their summer staffing hiring. Approximately 16 students have commenced their summer employment in the various departments, with several more to commence this month. All summer staff had attended the orientation session, which also includes a health, safety, and first aid component.
Thank you. Any questions on the report? Hearing none. Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. We move to Corporate Affairs Strategic Development. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you. The report is found on page 91. Staff were pleased to see the installation of our new George Stanley sculpture on May 30th. I've heard a few people referring to it as the Chocolate Man. He's not chocolate, he's bronze, I think. The artist Christian Toth was on hand to oversee the work, and there were lots of positive comments from passersby, and we're very pleased with the result. There will be an official celebration planned for July 1st, and this was part of the Canada 150 projects. All of those will be tied together this summer by a series of poetry on poles, which are written by local artists. As part of the planning needed for Lorne Street Phase 2, our consultant submitted an easement application under the Crown Lands and Forests Act for the portion of the drainage ditch in Abido that will extend into the Tantramar River. So the easement will accommodate the construction activities, and once they're completed, the ownership of the Abido will still be under the property of the New Brunswick Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, but the town will maintain a legal right to discharge stormwater into the Tantramar River. The application is now being recommended to the Minister of Energy and Resource Development, subject to the town's written acceptance, and I'll have a motion going forward to council tonight because that's needed in order for the mayor and clerk to sign the offer from the province. Sappy Fest 13 is scheduled to take place August 3rd to 5th with the main space and tent centered on Bridge Street between Main and Weldon and Lorne. And the town has been a past supporter of the music festival by contributing financially through our community development grants program, as well as providing a variety of in-kind services. Sappy Fest is significant for Sackville in terms of marketing and exposure and economic development and fostering our community identity that's rich in arts and culture. And it also brings in a significant number of young people to our town. A motion is needed to close Bridge Street and extend the noise bylaw and permit the beer garden on the public street and to loan a variety of equipment to the festival, and those will be coming forward. And Sackville's local Girl Guides group recently received a TD Friends of the Environment Fund grant for $2,500, and they will be planting several trees along our public parking area that's across from the sports fields on Lorne Street. This is a big help for us and a great achievement and learning opportunity for them. The guides will be joined by the Riverview Lawn and Garden, that's our landscaping contractor. They'll be there on June 16th at 11 a.m. to carry out the planting, and everyone is invited to attend.
Thank you, Councillor Butcher. Any questions on the report? And then proceed to the motions.
I have a couple. I move that council approve the following for the Sappy Fest Contemporary Arts Festival. To grant the temporary closure of Bridge Street from Lorne Street to Main Street on Thursday, August 2nd, 2018, beginning at 8 p.m. until Monday, August 6th, 2018 at 12 noon in order to facilitate the use of a tent for events during the festival. And to waive the rental of town-owned property such as tables, chairs, picnic tables, and other similar items from the Tantramar Veterans Memorial Civic Center to Sappy Fest from August 2nd, 2018 to August 6th, 2018, with the understanding that Sappy Fest will be responsible for lost or damaged equipment. And to grant a time exemption from 11 p.m. to midnight on Friday, August 3rd, 2018, and Saturday, August 4th, 2018, and Sunday, August 5th, 2018, as per bylaw number 246, the Town of Sackville Noise Bylaw, Section 5. And finally, that council grant permission for the Sappy Fest Contemporary Arts Festival to operate a beer garden in a secure area on Bridge Street on Friday, August 3rd, 2018, Saturday, August 4th, 2018, and Sunday, August 5th, 2018, subject to provincial liquor and safety laws, and obtaining liability insurance in the amount of $2 million, naming the town of Sackville as co-insured.
Moved by Councillor Butcher, seconded by Councillor Black. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
One more. I move that council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the letter of offer from the Crown Lands branch of the New Brunswick Department of Energy and Resource Development to secure an easement for the portion of the drainage ditch and Abido that will extend into the Tantramar River.
Moved by Councillor Butcher, seconded by Councillor Mitten. Would you like any supplemental, or is it? Mr. Acton, could you give a little bit of background, please?
Yeah, as kind of part of the phase 2, the location of the new Abido, and of course, we're going to be discharging water through the Abido and out into the Tantamar River, requires this easement in order to be able to do that. So this is just a formality to put that easement in place and have, as I said, Mayor and Clerk to sign off on that.
So it's an easement because the province controls the river, and if we're putting water into it, there has to be an agreement that we are allowed to do that. Yep. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. That takes us to new business, and there was none noted, so we have press questions.
I didn't hear the tender for the garbage coming forward as expected tonight. I'm wondering why.
I think last month was to get the direction from council. Staff are now working on the specifications of the tender, likely be going out to the public for public advertising in the next few weeks. The intent would be to bring something back to council probably September for a motion to council.
It was pretty clear at the last meeting that the collection of waste from larger apartment buildings greater than 4 units would not be part of this tender. Is there any change in that?
Staff is still proceeding with the tender with the apartments, 4+ units not part of the tender.
Thank you. One question on the heritage bylaw. Is there any plan for council to look at what other municipalities are doing, such as Lunenburg or St. John or Mahone Bay?
Right. Well, it's been done multiple times. There is a longer history that we probably should recognize. One is that we created a Heritage Advisory Committee in 2001, and that ended up with where they inventoried properties, they compared the types of practices elsewhere, and they did an inventory of historic places, and they did a variety of education and research, which also led to a report in 2004, and that report recommended that there be consideration of a Heritage Review Board under the Act. So we created a board at that point, and under the terms as suggested by that advisory committee, and it started to act on research and education and also about what the legislative possibilities were. They indicated that that they wanted to have some legislation, but would not accept the wording under the Act at that point. So it took until the Act was changed in 2010 before that actually happened. And that in December 2010, they made 5 recommended functions, and it was research, education, advice to owners, advice to council, and the duties under a bylaw. So it was only in December 2010 when that bylaw was actually adopted. So there was discussion of having activities prior to, without the Act, and there was quite a bit of that for several years. Then there was that Act, and then there was the review of that Act in the last little while, which again considered some of the places where what practices were ongoing. And I think that's when it became clear to all of us the format of the Heritage Review Board seems to be shallow in terms of delivering heritage results, and it also seems to be open to wide-ranging interpretation. One group was able to do stuff without an Act. Another group, you heard some of the people tonight feel that they were extremely dictatorial in how they implemented it. And then a third group, which we heard tonight, really hasn't done a whole lot, has issued 1 permit in 2 years. And so it's almost exactly the same framework. yet we have this wide array of results. And so it doesn't, my personal view is, I don't know why we would keep it when we keep getting proof that it's not meeting the community's objectives. So council will make their own decision on that, but that's what we talked about in the last little while. And what are the options? We have looked at multiple options. We found some that have, most of the successful ones are much more detailed, much more in-depth, much more focused on money and definitions, and those do seem to be working well. There was a conscious decision made by the advisory committee many years back that it only should be an appearance perspective, and that what was important was some of these other functions that they were doing and they were charged with. We're not seeing much of those other functions at all anymore. So there's some significant issues with the way in which this has been defined and the way in which it's been implemented. And I guess it's a long-winded answer to your question. The question is whether we're better off with something that has proven itself to not work, or is it better to stop and go back to the basics and see if the original assumptions back in 2001, 2005 are still correct.
Or to look at what other municipalities are doing.
We've done that. We've done that multiple times,
okay.
yeah. And we are well aware of that. As I said, most of those have a very different approach than what's in our heritage bylaw. And to be successful, I think we have to look at a different approach.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not feeling the best, so bear with me. I guess I'm just not clear on the work involving the sewer extension. I'm just wondering what the town will be responsible for with that work and with that project, and what is the property owner taking responsibility for? Like, they're paying for the materials? Is that?
Mr. Acton?
Yes, the developer, like any other property, they paid a fee for the services and are basically paying for the service, the 6-inch water and 8-inch sewer for to go on the municipal service easement that will service the ambulance facility as well as future developments in the area.
So at this time, will that line just extend to that property, or will it extend further?
The line will actually extend from Bridge Street, where the town last year put in future services, thinking that this may be a possibility down the road. So it'll extend from the end of Bridge Street through a municipal service easement that travels across private property. The municipal service easement was secured during the subdivision process of subdividing those properties, and so it will be on a municipal easement, and it'll lead all the way over to Robson, and on the way it will pick up the new ambulance facility.
And the town staff will be installing that? Is that correct?
It is the plan that the town forces will do the install, and the developer has agreed to pay all of the material costs for the lines and services.
Okay, so there's no actual, other than staff costs, there's no actual cost to the town?
No other pocket expenses to the town.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Question. That it for press? Questions from audience?
Hi, Sharon Hicks again. Just a few little things here. Regarding the fall fair plans, just a reminder, will portable washrooms be provided this year? They seem to have been missing last year. About the Lawrence Street Phase 2, we found out early last week that it's gone to tender. The tender documents show only one pond instead of the two holding ponds that we were told would be required in order for the drainage plan to work properly. So I'm wondering why there's only one pond, and also will the downsizing from 2 ponds to 1 pond be reflected in a reduction in the overall cost of the project?
So question one was that Sappy Fest didn't have bathrooms last year? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we attended the Friday night music portion of it, and everybody was going into Mel's to use the washroom. There was no public,
think-
like portable washroom facilities provided at that time.
I don't think that was Sappy Fest, because I remember you raised that and we went and talked to Mel's.
Did I
I
say?
think it was something else.
Fall
I think.
Fair, I said Fall Fair.
Ah, sorry.
Did I say Sappy
Yeah.
Fest? Oh, sorry. I've got Fall Fair written down. Pardon? The Chalk Festival? Was that the one it was? Okay, whichever one it was, okay. All right, so the ponds?
Mr. Acton?
In regards to the 2 ponds versus 1, the consultant, after they've designed the project, they've determined that, and put together their estimate for the project, that the third pond, I guess will be second pond, the Ducks Unlimited pond is going to be done by Ducks Unlimited. The pond number 2 is going to be the main pond, and they've determined that financially, if the third pond was feasible, that it would be looked at, but it didn't feel that it would be able to fit into the current budget for the project, and that's why it was eliminated and labeled as a future pond.
So originally, I was under the impression that the 2 ponds were required for the system to work properly, so how is that going to work with just 1 pond?
They have the existing, the pond that's designed, plus they have all the additional storage capacity and the drainage ditch from the Abido back to that pond. And I believe that they've looked at those aspects and feel that at this point, that will be what is required.
Okay. And now I'm curious about one other thing, too. Like I said, we were surprised to find out that it's gone to tender. When we attended, a lot of us attended a meeting back in November about the environmental impact assessment study, and that meeting was specifically for just the environment section. We were told that the plans were not ready at that time for the drainage ponds and the rest of it to be shared with the public or examined. We were told that there would be another public input meeting once the plans were ready before everything was finalized. Now, that obviously has not happened because it's already gone out to tender. This is not the first time that's happened when there's a project like this or other projects. I'm just wondering, can somebody explain why we're told that there's going to be public input meetings that never happen? We end up with public information sessions, which are different things. There's not an opportunity for citizens to have any input into what's going on. We're just told what's already been done. Is there a reason for that?
Mr. Burke?
Thanks, Sharon. I guess you're correct. The project for Phase 2 is gone out to tender. I think what we've indicated to the public all along was that I guess we need to be careful about the words that you use with respect to public information session and public consultation session. I don't think we ever committed to going out to having a consultation with the public where we've gone out asking for advice in terms of the overall design of the pond. We have, as recently as several weeks ago, met with several local biologists who have a considerable amount of expertise in ecology and biology, and met with them on the preliminary designs before we finalized the tender documents. So I guess what we're looking to do is, now the tender is out, we will be scheduling a public information meeting where we will have our representatives present again, as we've done in the past, being Crandall Engineering and some of our senior staff to be able to answer questions. We're also looking to do this in consultation, in cooperation with Ducks Unlimited, who we've talked about openly as being involved as part of Pond 1. They're still committed to doing that. We're just trying to work out a date with Ducks Unlimited at a time that's convenient for them.
Okay. That's all my questions for tonight. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by a whole bunch of people. Councillor Finney.
Mike's not here.
All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much.